We are starting with some introductory statements from the panelists, but just remember we want to focus on cross-border cooperation and the key policy questions dealing with contributing to territorial cohesion at cross-border transnational and regional level, territorial coordination of policies. We want to focus on territorial cohesion implementation mechanisms and strengthening the territorial cohesion at the EU level. So very interesting, very big points. And now we'll hurry up. Jean, would you start?
Good morning to everybody. Thank you for inviting MOT to comment a little bit. First, I would say that I congratulate both projects. They really contribute to understanding and improving cross-border cooperation. I will mainly comment the first one because it's closer to Maud's focus on projects, but the other one as well is quite interesting. Well, basically, I share most of the analysis and of the recommendations. I would like to concentrate on the issue of obstacles. I will take an example, the example of the cross-border hospital in Sardinia. So, sorry, some people say, well, you always speak about the same examples, but there are not so many full examples, and so I like this one, sorry. And I want to make a little detour, because before speaking about a cross-border hospital, I think it's useful to think what is an hospital? I mean, in a non-cross-border context. And this might not be so simple, I mean, because a hospital, for instance, in a rural area, it can be a challenge to keep the hospital in the rural area. And so we have to consider the different dimensions of the question. A hospital is always, I would say, a functional system. It's a machine that delivers care. A hospital is also an economic issue, because it's you insist on the fact that you want to study public services, but there is always a mix of public and private. And it depends on the national health systems. But in France, for instance, health is a mixed topic, and in any case, the public services have to demonstrate their affordability. So there is an economic dimension. It's also a politic dimension, because when it's about an hospital in a rural area, you have to take decisions. The local politicians want to keep their hospital. The regional or national ones sometimes want to concentrate territorially, so it's a topic. And of course, there is always, and perhaps the most important, is the human factor, because at the end, it's nurses or medical people that want to care ordinary people, and it's also about commitment and human things. And when you are in the case of a domestic hospital, all these dimensions are combined. There are very complex trade-offs. But what is clear is that you have a national framework to solve these trade-offs. I mean, you have legislation, you have political discussion, you have the practice, you have the culture of each country or region, and this doesn't solve the obstacles, but it gives a framework. And if you think now about the cross-border hospital, finally, it's the same problems. But the difference is that you have the border. And I would say probably the most difficult is not so much each category of obstacle, because if you take two medical people discussing about a care process, perhaps they have different approaches, but at the end they will agree to take decisions. And the same if you take people dealing with the economy side. I mean, they will discuss about a solution, or even legal. You can have two legal persons that will find an arrangement, or even politicians. But the point is, obstacles are mixed. Most of the cross-border obstacles will be a mix of the different kinds of obstacles. And my feeling is that very often behind a legal obstacle you can have a political obstacle. And this is, for instance, when a local person will find a solution for a cross-border obstacle, he will very often have to go to the national administration or the regional administration, and there you will have a civil servant that sometimes will say, well, it's not possible. because of I would say, sovereignty of the state and legislation. And this is where there is really a cross-border and European dimension, and this is where we have the toolbox of European intervention, and it's very clear that Interreg is important in this regard. And for instance, in Hospital of Sardinia, it funded the walls of the hospital, which is it was a 30 million euro ERDF. Perhaps sometimes it's also necessary to have other funds that Interreg, in most of cases, I would say. But indeed, this case it was really important. You have also these legal tools like EGTCs to fund to carry the governance of the hospital. But it's not enough. And this is where I want to make the link with the new draft regulation, because this regulation is supposed to solve obstacles, and I would say it has two very important dimensions. The first one is, of course, to allow the possibility to have these local solutions found through the implementation of the legislation of the other side of the border. And in the case of Sardinia, it would have certainly much accelerated the process to do so in various technical or legal questions. But I would say that probably the most important dimension of the regulation is also about the creation of a process. And what I said before, I mean the fact that when you locally have the solution, then you will have a problem maybe with your national administration. And because the regulation, if it is created, if it is developed, it will really create a sort of obligation for the states that are concerned, not to say necessarily yes to everything, because states still are there and they have their own legitimacy and constraints, but the states will have either to say yes or no and provide another solution, or if it's no, to say why, and it really creates, I would say, an explicit political discussions, and states will be obliged to set this network of national focal points, working on each border with the other side, and coordinated by DG Regio and the European focal point, and creating a sort of base of experiments about these cross-border obstacles for public services. And there I want to finish by something more linked with, I would say, big policy. It's about public services in general, not only cross-border. If you take, for instance, the crisis in France, but it could be said for other countries, in France, the state is historically legitimated by public services. It's very clear in the French history. And one of the aspects of the present crisis with the yellow vests it's a crisis of public services, basically, because people have the feeling that they pay more taxes to have less public services in some areas, and they are lost. And the point is the world is changing, and the public services have to adapt to change of localization of activity, to climate issues, to control of mobility, etc., etc. And this is where I would say that for the border areas, cross-border public service is really an opportunity to not only to deliver better services, sometimes for less money, to the people, but also to make people aware of the added value of cross-border cooperation in Europe. So we have a direct link between this issue of cross-border public services and the general integration across borders and at European level. So I really think that it's a good topic for ESPON, perhaps not only to work on cross-border public services, but also more generally to work about public services, change of dialectics between functional and institutional dimensions, like Andreas Faludi explained yesterday. So it's really a good topic for ESPON. Thank you.